few minutes for folks to trickle in.
Love the branding, Dirk. The shirt and the mug.
Wow. Wow.
You know, I did one of these things though, and I had the tactile, like I had one of our PowerPoint screen images sort of behind.
Yeah.
So, oh, Chris Earl. Hey, Chris.
Okay, let's just give it one more minute and we'll get started. All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this event, the third event in our BlackFocusX Launch Week series. BlackFocusX is a digital platform and marketplace specifically designed for Black entrepreneurs, founders, startups, and small businesses. We connect Black innovators to revenue opportunities and non-dilutive capital from the US government, the biggest buyer of innovation in the world. I'm Nina Gerber. I'm the Director of Startups and Social Impact at Ratio Exchange, and I'm part of the team launching BlackFocusX to connect Black innovators to government contracting opportunities to help accelerate their business. Today, we're going to be talking about how to win a government contract with a team who did it. I'm pleased to be joined by Nirav Desai, CEO of Moonbeam, and Dirck Schou, CEO of Tactile. One quick note for the audience, you can go ahead and drop questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen at any time, and we will ask them at the end. All right, let's get started. Over to Nirav and Dirck.
Thanks, Nina. And it's, of course, a pleasure to be working with Ratio on the launch of BlackFocusX. Very happy to have Dirk here with me. We have a long history of working together. And I wanted to share, kind of want to run this kind of as a conversation, give a little bit of background of each of our companies. I'll provide just kind of a general overview on what it means to work with the government and how to interpret RFPs. But Dirk, I really want to hear from you about your story, about how you first got into the federal space, how you got more traction and where it's going. So again, any lessons you can offer will be great. Quick introduction for me. I used to be with a large system integrator, ran their West Coast software development business, and then went on to be in their innovation group. Working a lot with startups, trying to get into the government space, and that was a motivation to start working with Ratio and starting Moonbeam. I'm on their broker network. I'm one of their brokers that helps companies connect with opportunities and both government and commercial. We are active users of the platform that Ratio is setting up. So Dirk, if you could give a little bit of background.
Yeah, Nirav, thanks for the intro, and Nina, and just honored to be part of BlackFocusX launch. Amazing opportunities out there, I think, and a really great focus. My name is Dirck Schou. I'm co-founder and CEO of Tactile. We are a 10-year-old technology company now. We started out in this space working very closely with a pseudo-governmental organization in AT&T when they were when they were the sole licensors of plans for the iPhone. We built out a number of fairly high profile sort of B2B2C applications for them. Started working with Microsoft in 2015 on the launch of the Windows Phone. Did some fairly high profile applications with them, and were invited to be part of what was called the HoloLens Agency Readiness Program. So Microsoft has a spatial computing platform called the HoloLens, which is a wearable head-mounted computer that understands space and context, and that you interface with through gestures and gaze and voice, et cetera. This technology has the potential to revolutionize it has the promise, it is inevitable that this technology will revolutionize the way that deskless workers interact with digital content and understand the world in which they work. So worked quite a bit on the early days with Microsoft, and started to build out a platform specifically designed for sort of public-private partnership companies, so oil and gas, defense, utilities, that sort of thing. And when you half of public-private is public, and in that sort of journey, we started to get a greater exposure to potential customers. And unlike a lot of companies that are doing business in defense and with the federal government, that sort of thing, we had no experience in working with that space. Like we had solely worked in the private sector. I had a few touch points personally with dealing with the public sector, but we knew that we were ill-equipped to go into this space. And Nirav, do you want me to sort of like jump into the rest of this story, or am I getting ahead of the talk track here?
So go ahead and keep going a little bit, because I do want to kind of set the groundwork, but I'll jump in and
I can get us from there to here in a minute or less here now, and then we can go back and revisit that. So we actually connected with Nirav's previous company, who still does a ton of business with the federal government, and we basically said, hey, how about we partner? Like, the government wants our solution, defense wants our solution. We don't know how to do business with them. We had a number of scenarios where we were working with folks like the Marines and the Army, and they saw our solutions and they said, I absolutely need this, but I have no idea how to buy it. And this is a real thing, right? Like, just because you have the thing that's going to solve problems doesn't mean that someone can buy it. And to be honest, we had enough self-awareness that we knew that we weren't going to figure this out by ourselves. We had a very partner-centric approach, and there's and I will just go down a rat hole for just a minute. There's this book called The Checklist Manifesto by a guy named Atul Gawande, and he was an emergency room doctor, and he basically was trying to eliminate infection and errors in the emergency room, and he broke everything down out of like these multiple complex processes into checklists, and in doing so was able to virtually eliminate infections that happen in the emergency room. We took that methodology, applied it to our product, because our product typically is used in complex industrial environments where it's impossible for one user to know an entire system. But we also took it into the way that we approach business. We are a very small specialty inside of a very large opportunity, and we knew that we were not going to understand the entire system. So we partnered with this systems integrator that had a ton of experience working with the government, And together, we were able to get our product in the hands of some users in the federal government, and that sort of like introduced us to this sort of this pipeline. That's probably not the right term, but this new world that is the government, and then we sort of went from there.
So Dirk, let me break in real quick, and I'll kind of break down the space. So Tactile is an amazingly innovative company with a very unique capability, and that capability is in demand in the government. But when you're talking about government procurements, you're talking about trillions of dollars annually, and it's not only about a contract, it's how you manage that contract and how the government manages a portfolio of contracts. So that introduces a term called the contract vehicle. And you have to be on the right vehicle to get access to even apply for a contract. And that's extremely daunting for a small business to take on, or innovative research-based startup. Or even just a services company, right? The question is, how do you get in the door? And so before we get into how we get in the door, if you don't mind, I'll break out kind of the contracting space into a few categories that might make it easier for the audience to understand. So you have your large contracts, which are like acquisitions of systems, or let's say a ship acquisition, which would also include things like professional services contracts in that category, or even lawn maintenance at a facility. All of those are your traditional contracts. And in order to bid on a contract, you often would be pre-qualified through a thing called an IDIQ, indefinite quantity, indefinite definition, indefinite quantity. Where there's it's a way of pre-qualifying bidders. And then you get invited to actually bid on the work. Another way to work with the government is through grants, particularly for research. So those can be your traditional research grant, or it could be something like a SBIR, STTR, Small Business Innovative Research Grant. That's actually a really great program for US-based companies to get into, basically have the government subsidize some of your product roadmap if it aligns with their needs. And then actually it's not a new category, but it's newly in vogue, is the OTA, the Other Transactional Authority. And this is a way that non-traditional government suppliers can get into the government space. And these are run through consortiums. I just want to lay that out just a kind of a way to get started. I'm going to mention some of these terms that we go through. The OTAs are really around, they're usually for your traditional venture-backed company that has a very unique and niche product that can be a benefit to the government, but really cannot take on the burden of being pre-qualified through a IDIQ or getting on a contract vehicle. Now, I bring that up because Dirk also mentioned system integrators. So often, small business startups will work with a system integrator to get in the door. And because the government wants to diversify the types of companies that they work with, they actually they add requirements that you have to have a certain percentage of small businesses on your bid. These are run through the Small Business Administration. They're called SBA set-asides. And often these are measured not just by small business, but there'll be a number of categories: women-owned businesses, economic disadvantaged minority-owned businesses, historically underutilized businesses, the 8A program, which is more geographically based. So the goal is to use government contracting to increase diversity and inclusion in the broader economy, but also the service sector that supplies the government. So that's a great program to know about for the audience here. But it also, knowing how to play this game and navigate and make the case to the large system integrators is a great way to get in the door. That way they have the contract vehicle and you ride on with their contract. and they take on a lot of the proposal work. You're providing the niche capability. So Dirk, that's kind of how we started working together, right? If you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about how we got started.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. In addition to those opportunities for entrepreneurs and companies to work through these different programs, there's also opportunities to become an expert at these programs and help other companies go through them. So Nirav mentioned the SBIR program. We actually won an SBIR program with the U.S. Army, and there are various phases along the way. We worked with a third party to understand how to get into that contract and to win it, and they were paid handsomely for their work, right? There's a big opportunity for that. So as far as how we got started with Nirav's company, it all starts with networking, right? Like, make sure your LinkedIn profiles are up to date. That's the number one thing that I can sort of give to budding entrepreneurs, because LinkedIn is an amazing platform, we Nirav and I connected over I think something sort of similar to this. Like, you had learned about what we were doing and invited me to a panel at a thing that your previous company was holding, and we just found that we had that we had sort of a common vision and common interests as far from a company perspective, right? We also have some personal common interests as well, but go ahead.
Well, truthfully, I think a good part of it was I was supporting a large contract with one of the naval shipyards, and you guys building a maintenance instruction and a knowledge capture system for maintainers. It just seemed a natural fit. I was looking for an innovative solution to bring to that contract. We're actually about 2 years away from recompete, so it was kind of at the point where we wanted to figure out how we planned to keep that work following on. And a great way from the corporate SI side was, let's bring on a small business that has a unique capability that can brand us as innovative.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting to note that vehicle, that contract vehicle, again, this is sort of at the macro level. That is something that a small business is not really typically set up to win themselves, especially right out of the gate. That award that we won was for a naval shipyard, but the contract was held through Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. It had nothing to do with the location where the deploy. So I just mentioned that to say, like, it's complicated, right? So we started working together, and we helped. We went through a lot as far, like, when you work with a third party like this, especially when you're getting on a major contract, there's a lot of compliance work that has to happen. There's a lot, like, security is a big concern, especially when you're talking about technology solutions, that sort of thing. So we invested a lot of time and effort, and eventually money into how we were going to help win this business. But in the big scheme of things, it was a fairly quick turnaround, I got to say. But you never, I had, there's an old saying that an old boss of mine used to like to say, I'd rather be lucky than good. There's an element of luck in everything, right? And you increase your likelihood of luck the harder that you work and the more that you network, right? And so I don't want to, there was not a master plan here, right? There's a lot of, just like, the entrepreneur's road is one of of failing as fast as you can. You know, it's one of trial and error. It's one of kissing a lot of frogs, and it's one of trying a lot of things. So I got to say, we probably got lucky when we first connected. However, you know, there was no way that we were not going to be doing business in the federal government just based on the technology that we had. Now that was, again, we sort of came upon this accidentally based on our product. If we were targeting, if we came out and we said, hey, we're going to go get some government business, we actually would have organized our company a little differently, and we would have hired a little differently, and we would have focused on different things. I think there's actually a really good opportunity for a small, focused, effective, smart group to do things like respond to grants and SBIRs. This is a way that companies get launched, right? Like that eventually turn into big companies. So although we took a bit of a long and winding road into the government, there are direct ways that can be accomplished, and stating your objectives up front and targeting those programs and those third parties that you want to partner with is an effective way to do that.
Well, Dirk, sorry, this leads great directly into my sales pitch, because I think you were working with system integrators and kind of stumbled into this, but based on the unique capability you had that you developed elsewhere. But you know, that was pre-Ratio, pre-BlackFocusX, pre-Moonbeam. Now part of what we're trying to do in this network is organize that serendipity and make it easier for companies to break into that and help them analyze, you know, what opportunities are real, what are, you know, where the low-hanging fruit is, right? Because time is critical for a startup. So for example, just to go back to that, just an example for the shipyard community, there are 4 naval shipyards in the country. Of that, there's only two of them have IT support contracts that are labeled in their own name. The other 2 ride on other contracts. One has a lot of transactional work through smaller contract vehicles that is distributed across a number of things. The other one rides on the larger shipyard on the East Coast contract. So how do you navigate that is extremely challenging. Finding the right partner that can help you, that already has a thrust around building inroads into that community, is really critical for success, right? And how do you navigate that information? I do want to ask you a question, Dirk. As a very, very cutting edge emerging technology company, how do you balance, and you've taken some SBR money, how do you balance both the government contracts are more set up to work, you know, not so much to, they want research for their purpose, right? They want capabilities to meet their purpose. You're working on building a product roadmap. So how do you balance kind of taking service revenue or bespoke research revenue with your broader product catalog and where your roadmap?
That's a great question. I will try to answer it simply and concisely. For the audience, for folks who may or may not know, you know, there's when you're talking about technology businesses, typically you're either building a product, which we have. Our product is called Manifest. It's a SaaS-based product. It's a piece of software that runs on a variety of hardware, or you are delivering services, i.e., you know, base maintenance services or over-the-shoulder training services done by ex-naval maintainers, that sort of thing. Our focus is on building our company from a product perspective. So our goal is to drive revenue for our product, which enables digital transformation of a whole lot of different deskless worker type jobs. Occasionally you have to do services with that. So that would mean like, okay, we have this product and we're talking to this group at the Army and they want this feature in the product, right? Or they want some level of integration of, okay, we want your product to talk to our system of record for product lifecycle management or for ERP or something like that. Occasionally, you do have to do work in that area, and if you're responding by yourself to a contract, you have to find the resources to do that work. Now that may be a distraction for you for your business, right? That you may not have the people on staff in order to do that. You also have to be very careful about how you outsource things. Like you can't outsource a lot of work for defense overseas because of security issues, right? So, but what you can do is you can partner with a systems integrator and they can do that work for you, right? And if you're someone like us, like our business model does not contemplate making margin on services. It contemplates recurring revenue and licensing revenue and stuff like that. So we're more than happy to sort of like honestly give away a large portion of the contract. Sometimes it's the majority of the contract to a third party in order just to get our software out there. And the balancing act that we go through is like, how do you let individual desires from a customer influence your product roadmap? Like if that services work touches your core product, then and this is outside of even this whole conversation, just as a guy who's running a company, you have very limited resources, and the lack of focus for a small company is a killer, right? And so if we're not focused on our mission and our vision for the product, then and we do this other things, then that allows our competition to catch up to us, or that sort of makes us less effective at our mission. However, oftentimes, like for us, you can look at a problem and you can say, okay, I'm going to take what they're saying verbatim and I'm going to do this. Or you can say, hey, we have a vision for this in our product. Maybe we can sell this group on that alignment, and then that money that's coming in from an SBIR or OTA, whatever that is, can help you with your roadmap. That was one of the things that Nirav started talking this conversation about is how these vehicles and how the federal government and defense can help fund the roadmap for a small company. So again, I'm sure that's clear as mud, but nothing about dealing with the federal government is clear. There's really no real roadmap. There's a lot of guidance. There's a lot of places that you can go to for help, and sometimes if you focus on a particular area, it's very easy to hit your target. But when you're growing a company at the same time, it can be complicated.
So, Dirk, you have a lot of experience in other larger enterprises selling into, say, you're working through the Microsoft ecosystem or selling into AT&T. I've always held the belief that, all of that complication really comes out of the scale at which the government functions. But when you're talking about some of these other larger corporations, it's similarly difficult to navigate. Understanding Microsoft's organization structure is a challenge. However, one thing about government contracting is it's amazingly transparent. You can search and look up which contracts are currently held, when they're coming up for recompete, who are the current primes and subcontractors, and identify how you want to work. There's also small business offices at most government agencies and contracting shops that, as a small business, particularly as a that meet certain SBA classifications, you can easily just call them up and talk with them about how you could potentially get into that client base.
So I'll give you one analogy that is from way back in the Dirck sort of evolution. So my father was involved in manufacturing. Actually, he is a ceramics manufacturer. He makes mugs and plates and stuff like that. It's a very competitive, low margin business, and there are very few of them left in the U.S. When I was 19, 20 in college, I was helping him on some things, and I basically said, listen, why don't we try to like sell mugs to naval captains? Like let's just see what we can do with the military, with the government. And I was in Tucson, Arizona, and I did a lot of research into this area, and I came across a group called SCORE, which is the Service Corps of Retired Engineers. And this is just a bunch of retired, very experienced, sort of like good people that are there just to help entrepreneurs and people with ideas sort of manifest those ideas. And I went down to the office, I met with some old guys at SCORE, and gave them some very rough ideas, and they pointed me in some directions, and we responded to an RFP from the government for sea-handled coffee mugs, and we won it. And that contract was many years, and in fact, it may be something still that my father's company is delivering on, and that was 30 years ago. And so, like, this is one of the things that we have not yet talked about, is that, like, if you can get yourself embedded, like the government and the military, they buy weird stuff that, like, other people that you don't even think about, that are just consumables, or that are things that they are going to need forever: paper, mugs, water delivery, maintenance services. And if you get in there, you can, and you get a contract, and that contract, you can understand where your profit margins are and all that stuff. That can be the basis. That can be that sort of like that security blanket that you have to build out the rest of your business. So although we talk a lot about complication, it's not impossible. It's not impossible to figure this stuff out, even on your own. And there are a lot of resources there. There's a lot of transparency, as Nirav was saying, and there's also a lot of stability in these long-term contracts, and that's something that cannot be understated, especially with an entrepreneur, which is typically it's a crazy roller coaster of ups and downs. And if you have a couple of these sort of like baseline contracts, then that allows you to sleep a little bit better at night.
Yeah, Nina, when in the introduction, used the term undilutive investment, and I think it's a great way of characterizing both government R&D, but also what a role a contract can play for you. In that, typically a venture-backed startup, you're giving away a certain amount of equity or percentage ownership of your company to an investor. With a stable government contract, you might have to be able to delay when you take that investment. You may be able to actually even get research money brought into the company through SBIRs or grants that work the same as venture capital investment, only that you don't have to pay. You don't have to give up any ownership of your company.
And by the way, you may not have the desire to raise venture money in the first place, right. And why would you? It's a difficult process. Yeah. If you're trying to really grow a software business and a scalable business, sometimes that matters. But like, that's not the inevitable road. Like getting one of these contracts and this non-dilutive cap. I mean, that just may be what the business evolves into, and that's that's great. You can make a great business out of that.
Yeah, and particularly if you are a minority founder or a former veteran or run a woman-owned company, these are in high demand for government contracting. So, and I would say the bulk of them are more service-based. So if you are a unique product company that is looking into the federal space, then you are given preference, and there's set-asides that require these large system integrators to give a good chunk of their work to small businesses. So we had a question on the chat, and Dirk, we could probably keep talking for a while, but I wouldn't mind going over the chat. We had a question about defining contract vehicles and why they're important. So just want to quickly address this. You could think of a, in the private space, it'd be called a master service agreement, right? Once you've done work with, say, Boeing, you're in their system. They know who you are. They vetted you. They know that you invoice on time. You have a track record of delivering, and you're more likely to get a follow-on contract. It's always getting that first one that's a challenge. A contract vehicle basically takes this function away from the particular agency or end office. So let's say that's a research lab, government research lab. They would have their own contract shop, but they will work with a contract vehicle owner, which is a government procurement agency that pre-vets companies. So what's interesting about contract vehicles, and from the system integrator space, that is a huge part of the game. You want to get on as many contract vehicles as possible, because that gives you the ability to apply to the contracts that are coming through that contract vehicle. If you're not on the vehicle, you're not even getting to the door, much less getting in. As a small business, you're never going to be able to get on enough on all the contract vehicles. And you may be working with and have a customer that really wants your capability, but they put the procurement out on a contract vehicle that you don't have access to. That means you can't do work for them. So that's the challenge. That's why it's important. What you want to do is have a robust enough partner ecosystem that you can get to the right contract vehicle through subcontracting. Sorry, quick response to that question, but I'd love to open up to the audience if there's any other questions. Nina, we're going through the chat, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
the chat or the Q&A, either one is fine. So yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead and ask questions if you have them.
While we're waiting for them to come in, Dirk, I have a question for you, and that is really around from a startup perspective, how do you evaluate the primes you want to work with when you're looking at the differences between Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, run through them all. How do you evaluate which one's a good fit, which one's not?
So for clarity, Nirav just used a term that I don't think we've used it yet, and that's prime. And I was actually just gonna mention that. So when he talked about these contract vehicles, and you see, Boeing was awarded this big contract or whatever, they are what's called the prime contract holder, and that prime contract holder is sort of the top level, and the prime will align their resources, both internal as well as their partners, to wrap up and do a delivery of this. So like, for example, when we work with Nirav's previous company, we give them our rate card, like what we charge for services, what we charge for a product. We scope it out, and that becomes part of their bid. Now, the prime contract holder has a lot of responsibilities that you don't want, right? These are reporting these are reporting responsibilities that you have to learn all these government systems. They have people that specialize. They have one person in their organization that specializes on, doing this one tiny thing. And they have 100 of those people or 1,000 of those people, that, and each one of them has their own little specialty. So like, daunting is not even the right term. It's frightening. Like the idea of going after sort of a prime contract, unless it's just so specifically written. So just FYI. And as far as, you know, that's a tough question for me to answer, right? If we had a product that we were like, let's say that I was an engineer and I was an engineer in a certain field and I was building a certain product and I knew that I could get a 20% increase in performance of this product, I would go after the companies that made that product, right? Or that type of product. Our platform is about making it easier for non-technical experts to create step-by-step processes and to have other people use those processes to complete jobs that they were either on or under trained for. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's the basic sort of overview of our product. There is a lot of applicability to this. We are building a horizontal platform versus a vertical solution. And so the other thing is that we have, to be honest, whether or not this was a strategy or whether we just happened into it, most of our traction comes from inbound leads or from active networking. And so sometimes we'll see an article and we'll read, you know, in a blog or in an online post or something, and someone's doing something and we'll reach out to them and we'll get business that way. But more likely it's, hey, we saw your product as part of, you know, a launch that you did with XYZ company and we want to learn more. There's something very intangible about traction. What is traction? What is momentum, right? And momentum and traction are both states at which companies start to come to you, and you know, and then again, like I said, there's luck. We were lucky. Nirav and I were lucky to connect with one another, but that was based on the fact that, you know, I had a personal goal of attending, you know, 2 in-person networking sessions a week when we started this out, right? And so we would just, you know, a lot of it is just like pounding the pavement and just, you know, making introductions. So that's probably not a particularly scientific response to your question, Nirav, but you know, it falls under the many ways to skin a cat analogy, right?
Well, so as you had a personal goal of pounding the pavement to be out there, conversely, I was in an organization that had dedicated staff to going out there and meeting with startups. So I would say looking for organizations that treat startups well and know how to deburden them and take on certain responsibility, but also you know, willing to step up and take on a lot of the prime responsibility of structuring data and data requests that make it easy for you to integrate into the proposals.
There's no question, and I mean this applies to the public sector as it does to companies supporting the private sector. I mean, you want to align yourselves. I mean, this is just general entrepreneurship, right? You want to align yourselves with people that have a desire to help small companies and small businesses and be innovative, and you want to look for incubators, and you want, like, there's so many of these things. I mean, like there is no Fortune 500 company, or there is no you know, multinational conglomerate that does not have some type of an incubation role or facility within that organization. Many of them have multiple, right? And and so identifying like who has the same mission as you, who do you have access to, who's closest to you, who do you know who's listed there, getting a little sort of scratch to get to the point where you can sort of like focus on this, even if it's whatever your idea is. It's not that difficult to do. It's difficult. You have to put effort into it. You have to be clear and concise, and you have to have a good vision. But if you have a good vision and you're willing to sort of put that effort into, I'd say that your chances are good that you could get someone to help to write that first check for you.
So we have a question on the chat. Shesh, thanks for that question. He's asking, is there a directory of these prime contracting entities? And it's a difficult question to answer. Yes, there is, but there's several. And each contracting shop will have a list of primes they work with. They who've won contracts. Each contract vehicle will have a list, are transparent on who has won, who's on that contract vehicle. This is kind of what Ratio, Moonbeam, BlackFocusX are addressing. We're centralizing that data in one repository called the Exchange and making that available to a broader audience. Nina, I if you don't mind me handing this question back to you, can you talk a little bit about BlackFocusX and what they're doing to make it easier for business intelligence on government contracting?
Yeah, definitely. So BlackFocusX is an initiative that was born out of an inequity that we saw in the federal market, and so we wanted to bring opportunities together with Black-owned businesses in as close contact as possible. And so how we do that is we aggregate all of the publicly available federal contracting information, both historical as well as open contracts, as well as any all companies that have ever done business with the federal government are in our system. And so we can do some pretty cool market intelligence with that, as well as we also partner with Crunchbase, and so we have even more companies to do these analytics with, and to be able to show Black entrepreneurs both what opportunities are out there that might be well suited to them, as well as what is their addressable market for the types of products and services that they have, and also to Nirav's point, who might be a good partner for them. So who might be a good prime that they could look at all of their information on everything they've ever done with the federal government, because that's all on the Exchange, and then be able to contact them, and not even be able to contact them cold, but be able to go in informed about what kind of business they do, what kind of contracts they're on, and what kinds of capabilities they might be looking to add to their team.
Got one question additionally on the chat asking how do I know which prime is best for my small business? And we kind of skirted around this earlier, but concretely, it depends on where you want to go. Like any partnership, you're buying to certainly partnering to get access, right? So if you might have a relationship with company X that only does work with the Army. Well, that's great. If you really want to go after Navy work, they're not going to help you. That's not where they have access. Likewise, you may want to do work with, you might want to do maintenance support work with the Navy. You partner with a company that has a lot of maintenance contracts, but they might be building a similar product as you, and they're not going to open doors for you because they view you as competition. So it's a tough question to answer because there's a lot of factors involved. That I would say the key element there is, as opposed to the private sector space, this data is open and public, and if you can navigate it well, you can choose who you want to spend your time working with.
I would say it's like sort of driving an initiative is a lot less likely to be effective as it is responding to a need, right? And so identifying where the needs are and who has that need, and then understanding, what your talk track is to how you can uniquely respond to that need. That's the way to go. I mean, there's certainly and if you're talking about like, hey, I have this great idea and I want to push this forward, I think, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think probably the best way to sort of go forward in that regard is through the grant process, right? Because anyone can write a grant request and you can write a grant request to NIST or to any of any national organization. They all have grant money and they all have processes through which you submit grants, and those processes are documented. Perhaps you guys are providing that input, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of ways to find out how to effectively write grants, and again, that's how a lot of companies get started.
Awesome. Well, I think that we should wrap it up, but thank you for all of those questions. That was really great. So I just want to thank Nirav and Dirck so much for sharing their time with us today, and also thank all of you for joining us. It's been a really great opportunity to hear a success story of a company winning government contracts and the ins and outs of how it really works. And if you're interested in learning more about BlackFocusX and how we can support your Black-owned business exploring the government contracting market, you can contact me via email at nina.gerber@ratioim.com, or you can go to blackfocusx.com and sign up for our newsletter to stay informed on federal market insights as well as events like this. And finally, we have 2 more events in our launch week, and we hope you can join us for those talks on Clubhouse tomorrow and Friday. So thanks again, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.